This module, we'll talk about motivating change. Since we spoke of some of the resistance that's commonly confronted by coaches and consultants, now we'll talk about how do you motivate change. So, the first question for you is, are we going to use the carrot, the stick, or the couch? And if you remember, we highly advise against thinking of yourself as the therapist offering the couch, unless that is your particular niche or area of expertise. But generally, most coaches and consultants are more focused on accomplishing some kind of outcome that does not involve mental health. So let's be clear on what we're talking about here. Is your client or the organization you are coaching and consulting ready for change? Because if they're not ready, it's going to be very difficult to motivate them to take the steps necessary to change. So, first thing, do they have a defined need? And I want to bring to your attention, sometimes they'll present with one need, and it's only through your questioning, using those open-ended questions, those closed-ended questions, asking who else does this impact, what are the causes of some of the snafus that they're encountering. You may identify a much deeper need, or they may have misidentified. I'm not suggesting we assume they're wrong, but I think we would need to confirm and clarify that we have the appropriate defined need before we move forward. Do they have the motivation to change? Are they willing to change? And sometimes it's as simple as asking the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being ready to do it right now, what is your bias to action? How badly do you want this? If they answer a middling or low number, that tells you this is not a high priority for them. It could be a very essential need, but they haven't judged it worthy of their focused attention at this point. So at that point, you might want to ask, what would it take to make this a 10 out of 10? What is missing in that motivation, in galvanizing you to want to take action? They may think it's a great idea, but they haven't got the resources to devote to it. That's another potential drain on motivation. They may not have the right commitment from all the various parties. In a marital counseling situation, you might have one spouse that is eager to meet with a therapist, coach, counselor, and you might have another spouse who doesn't want to move forward with that, who feels that's a waste of time or money or doesn't wish to be exposed in that way. They have to have a clear vision of what's in it for them, how they are going to gain as a result of this particular action or inaction or whatever it may be. And do they have the right morale to do this? Are they prepared? Are they committed? Are they ready to take the steps necessary? If those are not in place, then you're going to have a struggle to get them to execute and implement as you'd like. They have to be willing to participate. If they're just going to sit back and expect you as the coach or consultant to do all of the work, it's not going to be successful. Frankly, even if you do complete that project, it won't have long-standing impact because when you leave, so does the result. It has to be the transfer. You provide the process, the skills, the knowledge, perhaps the tools, a product, whatever it may be, but until they embrace it, integrate it into their behaviors or approach or outlook, it's not going to change when you leave that client site. So therefore, highly recommended, you come prepared with success stories where you have been able to help others, where you have seen the results of your actions. These success stories are really essential in helping people see it's worth their time, energy, and effort. Now, for some of you who are just starting out, you may be wondering, I don't have any success stories, what do I share? Couple of responses to that. One is you can use your own journey as your success story. How you evolved from one perspective to another, hands or not, how some other person, client, organization was able to achieve the objective through either a process, a product very similar to the one you're offering, or maybe even if it's not similar, how they were able to uncover a need, have it addressed, see the qualitative and quantitative result, and how you're prepared to help them along the way through your product, service, energies, efforts, etc. So success stories, testimonials, case studies are really helpful in motivating people to take that next step. So how do you exactly create readiness? Reveal discrepancies or the gap between the current situation and the idealized or desired state that your prospect, your client, wishes to reach or achieve. The larger that gap, obviously, the more likely people are to respond to address it. You can sensitize your client, or if it's more broad to the organization, the pressures for change. That might be what competition is doing, it might be what the market is now demanding, it might be in the personal example, how the growth and maturation of children is impacting a relationship. In your life coaching, it might be based on someone's life stage as they are getting married, as they're having children, as they're divorcing, if that should be the case, as they are retiring. All these kinds of lifestyle, life stage differences would be opportunities for you to point out the nature of the change that's required and how you're there to help them. Clearly, another way is to identify the cost of standing still. If they don't change, what would the impact be? You can't remain in the same place and expect to reach a different destination than the one you were at previously. So you're going to have to, as the client, evolve, move, change to reach the new summit, the new goal, the new objective. If you're not prepared to do that, Mr. or Ms. Client, then you're going to struggle to get to that next objective. They have to have credible outcome expectations. There has to be the clear vision of what the outcome would be, but then you also have to help them see the milestones, the mileposts in between, where they currently are, the size of the gap, the steps you are prepared to help them take to reach the ultimate goal or objective, so that we have mini wins in between. It can look very daunting to stand at one end of this scale, look forward at what we hope to ultimately achieve, recognize it's such a large, tall order, and decide not to do anything at all. By building in these midpoint checkpoints, you're able to make it more digestible, more accessible for them, and be able to maintain motivation and momentum. So, other ideas when it comes to resistance. As we had referenced earlier, there could be certain political climate needs that you're going to have to work through. People are very closely aligned with their job titles, their job functions, their role within a family as an elderly person who has parented their children. Those children now become adult, and the elderly parent is now unable to do some of the things they once did. They have to rely upon their adult child. It's a very different challenge for both, for the adult child and for the parent who once ministered to their child, now having to be cared for. So there are going to be certain political things that you're going to be confronted with. Absolutely, always have to keep in mind what's in it for me. Every one of us at some level are self-interested entities. If we're not addressing how our client stands to win or gain or reduce friction or overcome adversity, that there's little motivation, little reason to move forward. We have to make it very personal. Yes, we could talk about the good of a larger entity, the larger family, the larger department or function or organizational unit, but if we don't also include the individual's opportunity to gain, then there's going to be a struggle to get your product or service accepted. So we have to always be mindful of what's the impact on others, whether they're family members or peers or others in the community or neighborhood. How is whatever it is that's being proposed, whatever the objective is, what's that impact going to be on those around the immediate person you're speaking to? If we can't address that, then you're inviting all the people to whisper into the ear of your prospect, oh, it won't work because, oh, it's not going to be satisfactory due to, or whatever their naysaying may include. So be very mindful to bring those other people into the discussion, at least with your prospect, so that you can address larger issues than just the initial attempt by you to understand your prospect or client's requirements and needs. And obviously, as we had referenced earlier, some of those conflicting rewards. Make sure that what is being measured addresses and helps achieve the objective. Otherwise, people will default to where they are rewarded. Even if they know better, they will revert back to that which provides pleasure. The reward of one kind or another is pleasurable, and so even if they cognitively know it's not what's best, because we're self-interested, they will revert back to that. So be prepared for that. Motion over emotion is the next thing I want to address. Sir Isaac Newton, the preeminent authority in his first law, remarked, an object at rest will stay at rest. An object in motion will stay in motion at constant velocity unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Translation, if we don't make the change meaningful enough, attractive enough for somebody to take action, they're going to remain in place. So we have to be certain that whatever it is that we are offering or suggesting provides a greater incentive than remaining in their current place, be it an emotional place, be it in a knowledge and skill place, whatever that may be. We have to make it much more attractive, otherwise you'll have a difficult time getting that person to move forward. The first step is always the hardest. As you look at a long journey, it's sometimes, unfortunately, our default to say, oh, look how far it is, look how much weight I have to lose, look how much I have to learn in order for me to be declared certified, or whatever it may be. So we have to be able to say, the first step is the one that you need to overcome, and then it's all going to flow from there. You need to, instead of pondering and thinking and planning and postulating. As Nike says, just do it. Take that first step, and the rest will then fall in line once you develop that momentum. We can build inertia. We can use Sir Isaac Newton's laws to greatest effect once we get that motion, that movement in the direction that we'd like it to be, and we can leverage that progress to gain additional progress. So let me hearken back for some of you to your maybe 9th or 10th grade chemistry lessons. Here, what I want you to think about is the role of a catalyst. So when you were playing with the beakers and you had chemicals to create new ones, if you put hydrogen together with oxygen, you create water, H2O. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to separate them once they are together. If you put that candy Mentos into a bottle or a can of carbonated beverage, you create a frothing explosion. Once that Mentos candy is inserted, really difficult to remove it. I bring these examples up to you because we don't want to do that. We don't want to become part of that entity. We are the coach, we are the consultant, so two chemicals can create the reaction, but they are forever changed. You, as the coach consultant, you need to be able to engage and interact as a change agent. But you can then be removed, maybe a little wiser, but relatively unscathed for the experience, to continue to work with future prospects, clients, and customers. If you get too wrapped up into their reality, then you're nothing but the frothing explosion coming out of that carbonated beverage. And we don't want that. We want you to develop your skills, use the lessons learned from each of your engagements, but then do your best so that you can take those lessons learned and apply them elsewhere and not become part of that particular organization. So we want you to be a catalyst, a substance that alters the speed of a chemical reaction and does not appear in the final product, and you undergo no significant permanent changes. You have to retain a level of objectivity so that you can do your best work at the 2nd, 3rd, 10th, and beyond prospect and client. Your role is to be the catalyst. Now I want to introduce to you a little scientific-y Lewin's change model so that you can see what's involved to get somebody to move up the chain towards a new output or outcome. So what Lewin maintained was that change is a modification of the forces keeping a behavior system stable. What that means is that change has to be something that upsets the standard for right now. If we don't have something that forces, moves the client towards a different behavior or knowledge or skill set, then we're not going to be able to get them to change. There are two forces. One, pushing to remain in place, the status quo. One, pushing for change. When both forces are equal, status quo will carry the day and win. He has a 3-step model to graphically depict what this looks like. To change, you have to get what he calls unfreezing. What that means is that the client is willing, is motivated to change from where they are to some future state. They have to recognize that there's a better way, a more effective, efficient, higher quality, whatever it may be that is compelling them to move forward. They have to be willing to release, let go, or what he calls unfreeze in their current environment. Then there's the activity of change. He labels that as movement. Once you reach a desired state, you refreeze. You again become static or stable at that level. Maybe subject to additional unfreezing in the future, but at least this is the process that one has to undergo, is a letting go of the current, the activity to change, and then the stabilization in that new state. Contrast that, and they really reach the same output and outcome with what's called the action research model. Here you identify a problem, you see in the upper left, problem identification. Then there's some kind of engagement with what is labeled a behavioral scientist. Translation, that's you, someone who's going to change behavior. You have to then gather the appropriate data, make your initial assessment or preliminary diagnosis, provide feedback. This is what I've seen, this is what I have collected, and confirm with your client, does that still make sense to you? Do you see it differently? You must engage with the client. You can't just drop a report on their desk. You can't just tell them this is how it is. They have to participate in this, which is why it's important that there be that joint diagnosis, as you see at the top on the right. You have to both agree on the diagnosis. Only then can you go through joint action planning, and again, the important word here is that it's mutual, it's collaborative. You're both working together on this. After the planning, you take the appropriate actions or activities. Then you gather the data again after the action to determine, was it a success? Where do we need to do remedial activities? Where do we have to change or modify our approach? And you provide feedback to the client based on that, re-entering into a group decision. Is the diagnosis now appropriate based on that information? And you continue cyclically through this process so that you can continue to make the necessary changes, see the appropriate results, modify as necessary, etc. The general model of planned change includes entering and contracting. We're going to establish what it is we're going to be doing. We're going to discuss what the appropriate measures or metrics are that will be employed. We'll determine each of our roles, you as coach, consultant, they as client. You will, again, jointly diagnose what needs to change, why it is relevant and meaningful. You'll do all the appropriate planning and implementing of that required change, all those different steps, and then you'll evaluate, and in the Lewin model, this would now be refreezing, institutionalize that change. This is all saying the same things, but just giving you different perceptions on how to communicate this to your client in terms of what you intend to do with them at a very macro level. I want to thank you for your participation and attendance on this module, and look forward, there I am, and look forward to having you participate in the next few modules as we continue to build your skills as a coach consultant. Look forward to it. Talk to you soon on the other side. Bye.